Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Two Witnesses Live. Watchful and I here with Ben from Suspicious Observers. Watchful, how are you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Very busy day. Literally been on the phone or in some kind of a meeting for the entire day, just dealing with stuff. It's been crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben, how's it out there in your neck of the woods?
Just about sunset here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll cut to the chase, and why don't you bring us up to speed on what you feel is going on and what isn't going on, and what do you think has changed in the last 4 or 5 months? It seems like your perspective on the pole shift is looks like it's speeding up from the last time that we spoke.
Yeah, certainly. I guess we'll start with today. As I mentioned to you right before we jumped online, this has been one of the busiest days of my entire life.
Wow.
Um, we had four significant eruptions on the sun today, and three of them are going to give direct impacts to Earth this weekend.
Oh boy.
Um, I don't think it's going to be at kill shot level, but th- these these are some of they will combine to give us probably one of the strongest geomagnetic storms in quite a while. I expect the aurora to be visible for probably about half the United States, if not more. Um,
Wow.
Wow.
of course, clouds notwithstanding, if everybody had clear skies, I would say, over half the country would be able to see the auroras this weekend.
Huh.
Um, Sunspots may not be done yet. We've had I've almost lost track of how many X-class solar flares there have been in the last week. It's been very, very busy. Solar maximum is here and kicking in high gear, that's for sure. And so that's what I'm looking at right now. I'm hoping we don't have any more eruptions that get aimed at Earth, but it's going to be a active weekend. That's for sure. It's going to be an active weekend. But in terms of what you were mentioning, yeah, we got some pretty concerning confirmatory evidence of something we've been saying for quite a while now. We shattered the record for the Northern Lights last year in terms of how far down it comes and how many times it happened. And as if that's not already big enough news, the sun didn't do anything too spectacular. It was sort of modest, run of the mill solar activity, and yet we broke an auroral record. And you combine those two things, and you have to say, okay, what's going on? At the same
Weakened
time,
field.
yeah, the level of disruption to Earth's magnetic field from those events, during those events, was much higher than would be expected, um, given what the sun actually threw at us. And again, the auroras, the northern lights that appeared, were far in excess of even that higher than expected magnetic disruption to our planet. And I've spent a good bit of the last couple of months telling people, hey, this is about as good a sign as we can have that this magnetic pole shift that we have been tracking, that we have been in the beginnings of, has hit an acceleration point and is speeding up much faster now. And most people who pay attention, they sort of got it. They understand. They could see the evidence there. But in just the last month, we have had some significant confirmation of that. So one of the best scientists in terms of this stuff in the entire world, it's a Russian guy by the name of Sergei Simonenko. And he put out a study in early April that said we had a major magnetic anomaly in March of 2023, and we are now very much deep into the magnetic pole shift, the geomagnetic excursion, what we've identified and others have identified as the great disaster cycle of our planet, the thing that's written about in mythology and is alluded to in religious texts. things like that. And so it was a pretty big confirmation that, hey, what we saw all last year and the reason we hypothesized for why we were seeing it was indeed correct. We had an acceleration of the magnetic pole shift in March of 2023. It's the reason why the auroras have been off the charts. It's the reason why the magnetic disruption to our planet has been off the charts. And we actually got 2 other papers in just the following weeks to that paper by Sergey, talking about unexpectedly high electric currents induced into the ground from those solar storms, and a completely unprecedented plasma breakthrough from space into the atmosphere, what they are actually calling a new type of geomagnetic disturbance. They didn't go so far as to describe the fact that it happened with relatively weak solar activity. I mean, it wasn't anything terribly scary. I would say it was 10 to 20 times weaker than what happened on Halloween back in 2003. Nowhere near as powerful as what took out the Quebec province's electricity in 1989. And yet it's doing things to our planet that are on the same level that we used to see with 10 to 20 times stronger solar blasts. And the only way that can be, and including creating a new type of magnetic disturbance on our planet, and the only way that can be possible is if the Earth's shield, the magnetic field of our planet, is weakening much faster and to a much greater degree than we have seen before. And
how much more can it take? How much more can it take?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. That's what I've been thinking in my head. I'm like, how much more can it take? Because you're getting the signs that indicate that these storms are really bad based off the aurora borealis. But like you're saying, they're not that bad. It's just appearing that way because the Earth's shields are weakening. So how much more can it take before it just goes?
You know, it's tough to say. And here, I can probably describe it best by putting it this way. Nobody would be shocked if you were in your house, a tornado hits your house, it blows out some windows, and your whole house is shaking. Nobody would be surprised by that. But if it's a gentle summer breeze and windows are blowing out and your house starts shaking, and you walk outside and you're like, what the heck?
What gives? Yeah.
What gives? It's not even knocking me over. All the trees are still standing. What's going on here? You might have to say, is there something wrong with my house? Now, you could make that argument and you could recognize that something's not right, but you wouldn't be able to then tell somebody, okay, I think it'll be this many days until my house collapses, or I think it'll be this mile per hour wind and my house will collapse. All we can say is this was a major acceleration. This was one of the things that, unfortunately, we've been expecting to occur. We don't know the exact quantitative data on how much of an acceleration it was or how weak the magnetic field has become. All we have is the qualitative word description without the numbers. And so it would be much better if we could quantify things and say, okay, this from the sun would do it, or it's this amount of time before Earth's atmosphere is completely vulnerable to the sun. We can't do that, but we can say that this thing that we've been tracking and which scientists all over the world have tied in the geologic data to major climate events, volcanic upticks in earthquakes and tsunamis, and major surges in the extinctions of species. We can say that this process is speeding up, and it's looking like our forecast for this happening at some point in the 2030s or 2040s is absolutely correct, if not playing it a little too safe with the timing. If we were to get another acceleration or two of this magnitude, we, at that point, we could only have months left. And so,
Wow.
Luckily, these accelerations are happening anywhere from every 3 to every 11 years. And the last two were nowhere near the magnitude of the acceleration we took 13 and a half months ago in March of 2023. That's the other thing. They happen every 3 to 11 years, and sometimes they're little and sometimes they're pretty major. Hopefully the next ones are not major, and hopefully they don't come in 3 years and 3 years after that. Otherwise, we could be looking at the end of the 2020s or 2030 or so.
Wow.
Thus far, we have not had two in a row that were that were super powerful, and we have not had two short period intervals. We did have one time where there was only 3 years in between, but it was 11 years before that, and it's been 7 years since that happened. And so we can say that if I was to make a best guess, somewhere between the mid 2030s to early 2040s is when we would get to the point where the planet is now so vulnerable that our power grids are going to start dropping, that internet and cellular networks are in major trouble, and we should basically just be resigned to going back to the Stone Age. That's what's on our plate for the future. And it's really been quite the thing. And that solar activity I mentioned that's coming for this weekend. I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
A decade ago, I would have said, yeah, okay, this triple impact we're going to get, it will cause some geomagnetic storms, but nobody worry about anything.
Right.
I have to give this about a 5% chance of being a kill shot. Now, on one hand, I've never done that. I've never given a 5% chance that this is the solar EMP. This is the solar kill shot coming in 2 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
On the other hand, 5% is only 5%. But it's the kind of thing where that wouldn't have even come into my head a decade ago during the last sunspot cycle. It wouldn't have come into my head a year and a half ago.
Yeah, you're very conservative with your so I've always appreciated that you take a conservative stance. So that's it.
Yeah, well,
it says a lot when you say something because you're normally very conservative with your perspective.
Yeah, and in the overall scheme of things, 5% is not a huge chance of it being the kill shot. This is not a huge chance of the solar EMP, but after watching what's happened the last year, after these papers that have come out in just the last 5 or 6 weeks, and just at the start of this month, I think it was May 3rd or May 5th, we took a level 3 solar storm, which is, it goes up to level 5. And so level 3 is not necessarily scary. The problem is, I'm looking at the solar wind going, what in the hell did this? I see some little blips here. I see a little, it was nothing. It was that summer breeze shaking the house.
Yeah.
And so seeing all of that, I now have to at least recognize that things are possibly further along and more vulnerable than I would have imagined they would be at this time. I have to acknowledge the possibility that my notions of how this was going to play out may have been wrong, and that things are actually a little worse than I've been telling everyone for the last 5 or 6 years. Now, I'm trying to keep up with the data. So like I said, I acknowledge the possibility that this is the kill shot in my videos today. And I've been, for months saying, guys, I think we hit a tipping point. I think we hit an acceleration node here. And when these papers came out, I wasn't shy about sharing the information. But so I'm at the point where I'm trying to put myself to the side and do my best to take a conservative stance, a rational stance on some very troubling information. Very troubling information. And so that's really where we are at this point.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and it's not like the shields are going to heal during this cycle.
Oh,
So
no.
it's like everything is downhill from here. It's just a matter of how fast are we accelerating and what little bump is going to have an effect.
It's downhill until the catastrophe. You know,
Yeah.
The great deluge, the great floods, fire from the sky. After that, we return to a bit of a golden age. You know, luckily, that's what the math suggests should happen. And people in India have actually survived 5 of these cycles. And what they describe is an absolute cosmic level disaster, followed relatively quickly by a golden age. The problem is the cosmic level disaster takes out most of the people. It's never taken out everyone. And if you can get past it, it's fantastic. But yeah, things aren't going to improve until we pass the survival test, the survival gauntlet thrown at us by the Earth and the Sun.
Well, you know, what if the powers that be try to use it as an opportunity to kill the grid and blame it on that, so that they don't have to take the blame?
So,
yeah.
In theory, they could. The problem is they're not done prepping yet.
That's what I said.
They're not done prepping yet.
Yeah, you're right, because
they need more time. I mean, if it seems like everything has accelerated the last couple of years, not talking about the pole shift or the effects of the sun on the Earth, if it seems like, and you know, we have to admit this, even if you had the eyes to see what's going on with things like Agenda 2020 and Agenda 2030, with the New World Order, with the slow stripping of freedom and the taking of control, we have to admit they were at it for a long time trying to be as covert as humanly possible. And
not
it was
anymore.
drips and drips and drips. Not anymore. People are waking up in droves and they don't care. Why? They know they can be reckless. There's not enough time left for there to be a reckoning against them.
Oh, yeah.
They know
you're
there's
absolutely
not going
right.
to be, you know, they know that the day where there's no tomorrow is coming soon enough where they don't have to hide anymore. But this also tells us, you know, the level of obviousness and the speed with which they are just screwing with the rest of us tells us they're not there yet. They're not ready.
Yeah.
They do not
right.
want the power going out this weekend. They do not want a global EMP this weekend. That would be very bad for them. I mean, it would be bad for the rest of us, obviously, but that would be very bad for them as well, because they have these delusions of grandeur where they're going to just waltz into the next stage of Earth sitting on top of the pyramid, and everything's going to be all hunky-dory. And whoever survives, they're just going to have their slaves there.
Yeah.
That's what they want. That's what they think they can achieve. But they're definitely not ready yet.
Yeah.
For this one that's on the weekend, is there anything that we can do, pairs, or anything to expect? I mean, is this only weather related, or is this potential Carrington level stuff?
So, like I said, there's a 5% chance that this is a Carrington level kill shot storm, even though what the sun threw at us was not the level of the Carrington event, an X80 super flare from the sun. You know, that's not what the sun threw at us. But the sun threw 3 relatively strong blasts at us. And this is by far the most the sun has thrown at us this sunspot cycle. And we have already seen way too much solar storm activity and auroral activity and technological disruptions with the modest space weather we've seen. I would say that this is above modest space weather. This is strong space weather. Normally, it would not be kill shot level. Now, in terms of what to watch for, yeah, there's going to be weather effects. The primary ones are going to be on the jet streams, the storm systems through the global electric circuit, and on the other side of that, the high pressure cells as well. So if you're in a part of the world that this weekend and next week, it's supposed to be warm and sunny, it's going to be even warmer. It's going to be hot. If you're in an area where you're expected to get thunderstorms or tornadoes, well, that's already accelerating due to the solar flare magnetic crochet effect. Yes, the solar wind blasts haven't hit us yet, but our atmosphere is already getting juiced up by these solar flares. Things like that. We should probably expect a little uptick in earthquake and volcanic activity. One of the places I'm looking for the latter is actually Hawaii, where they've closed the national park due to an earthquake swarm that's been going on for the last several days. And when I look at it, it looks like magmatic tremors on the seismographs. It doesn't look like regular earthquakes. It looks like magma moving. But, you know, the other thing is we have to remember the human health aspect and the technological effect. I have to imagine we're going to see some technological issues this weekend and into early next week.
That was going to be my next question. Should I be unplugging all my gear?
I don't think I would go that far. It's more likely to be large-scale networks that take issues. Things like we could see power grid fluctuations. We could see service providers of internet and cellular have issues. Things like PlayStation networks seem to go down all the time. You know, we're talking about the big networks, and that does include things like air traffic control or national and international individual airline systems. Things like Google services, like whether that's Gmail or Google Drive, or the similar things from Yahoo. We're most likely looking at the large scale stuff. We're not looking at, you know, your computer exploding on your desk. But the other thing is, I mean, I can tell you, like, this is always true when you get a solar storm, and so it's definitely going to be true this weekend and through next week. There's going to be an uptick in cardiac arrests. The entire population is going to have changes in heart rate variability, blood pressure, and other things like that. For most of us, it doesn't matter. I mean, it won't be the kind of thing that comes anywhere near what happens to me when I go in the gym in terms of heart rate variability. But for the vulnerable population, for those high-risk cardiac patients, this is a high risk next 10 days. For people who have autoimmune disorders, it's a high risk next 10 days. For people who get seizures, for people who get migraines, this is a high risk next 10 days. For those who have diagnosed psychological issues or are prone to emotional instability, this is a high risk next 10 days. And unfortunately, that comes with things like social unrest, crime, murder, even down to a husband and wife fighting too much. And so from a physiological, from a psychological, from a technological, and from a meteorological and seismological perspective, I'm expecting a ramp up among several of those vectors over the next 10 days.
Wow. So it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's the kind of thing where, you know, if there's a 3 to 10% uptick in cardiac arrests, the data won't even tell the world that for 2 years. It takes that long for data to be compiled and confirmed and aggregated and studied and analyzed and written about and submitted and peer reviewed and then announced. I mean, we just know because of all the times it's happened in the past. And something like this is super easy to bury in a news cycle, to cover up with some kind of celebrity news. The technological stuff, all the major tech issues that have happened in the last 2 years have been during solar storms. And the news always has some explanation, like it was a software update that went wrong. It was Russian or Chinese hackers.
Right.
The news is going to be able to bury it. Guaranteed. They're going to be able to bury it. But for those with the eyes to see, who know what you're looking for, I mean, chances are if that's you, you're already ignoring the news as explanations for things. So, yeah, that would be what I would expect over the next couple of days. You know, we're talking short term now, the space weather, and hopefully I'm correct in that it's just a little 5% chance of it being the solar EMP, the solar kill shot, and hopefully it doesn't take out everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be the case. Of course, these dangerous sunspots are still flaring. They're still facing the Earth, and it's why we watch every day. It's why my last day off was 2011. I feel uncomfortable taking days off now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I get that.
No, somebody needs to be watching.
Yeah, they do. So, I mean, it sounds like for not something to be afraid of, right? Not something to fear. Just be aware of it. You know, if you're in an area that's prone to disasters or prone to weather effects, make sure you're prepared. Have your water, have your food, have your go bag, whatever it is you need for the particular area that you're in. Those with health issues, be mindful of it. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't have a cardiac problem. I don't know how you prepare for those things. Make sure you got your medicine. Don't exert yourself. Make sure your air conditioning's working.
Take some aspirin.
Take some aspirin.
Try to stay calm. Yeah. Meditate. Breathe. You know, if you have the choice to not do cognitive or motor sensory heavy stuff, I would put it off a little bit. So, for example, let's say you're a tightrope walker. That's what you do for a living, okay? And, you know, you got a show 6 months from now where you got to do a tightrope walk between two skyscrapers without a net for the show, the kind of thing where everybody knows if you fall, you die. And you have to pick a time. You're like, okay, I've been training, I've been doing it on the rope. It's 3 feet off the ground. Now I need to take it up to a higher level to really make sure I can do it under pressure and practice it under pressure. Don't do it in the next 10 days. Wait. Because the other things that go down, the same electrical energy that induces the emotional instability and the panic, fear, terror response to these things also reduces our motor skills and our cognition. So everybody over the next 10 days is going to get just a tiny bit dumber, just a tiny bit clumsier. It's the kind of stuff where most people aren't going to notice it. Right?
Right.
Yeah. What do you think, to shift gears for a second, what do you make of all these college campus protests?
Oh.
Freaking idiots.
Yeah.
Idiots.
I think
I gotta be honest.
It's paid organized.
You know, for the civilians living in all these places in the world, God bless them. I wish them the best. I don't give two swear words about Ukraine, about Russia, about Israel, about Palestine, Gaza, whatever. I don't care. This is quite the theater, quite the show they're putting on for us. If you've been convinced to very firmly and passionately take a side, you haven't been paying enough attention, because there's no good guys in all this. I see nothing but bad actors and lies on the news at this point.
Yeah.
I don't give a crap about any of these. Like, none of it concerns me. I'm sick of seeing billions of dollars going overseas for what are probably lies anyway. I'm sick of seeing millions of people crossing our border, and every time I look at the video, I'm like, where are the women? Where are the children? Where are the old people? This looks like an army. I'm sick of all of it. And I think that this stuff on the college campuses is... I mean, here's the thing. College campuses have historically been a place where relatively intelligent people have a lot of time in a small environment to sit and think critically. They don't want that. They don't want that. They need to control that. They need to make them angry. They need to get them focused on something external, anything other than the real problems that we're facing. And they're doing a very, very good job right now.
Yeah.
As much as these elites suck, they don't suck at what they do. They're good at this. They've been doing this a while. They've been doing this for a while.
It's the same people that during the last administration, when we had cities burning down over that summer, it's the same organization organizing this.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a giant distraction for something.
They're distracting.
Gives them time to keep building their bunkers.
You know what's interesting?
Building their bunkers, grabbing control, grabbing resources, grabbing power any way that they can.
Yeah.
Ben, do you find it odd that we're not seeing a plethora of election cycle propaganda like we normally do?
In what way?
Shoot, Ben, the election's in 4 or 5 months. Normally, every commercial on TV is propaganda for one or the other. It's like there's not even an election happening.
Yep.
Maybe
there's no debate.
But think about it.
Hold on, wait. I don't think anybody thought there was going to be a debate between Joe Biden and anything. Like, I don't think anybody actually thought he was going to get on stage and have an intellectual conversation with another human. But yeah, I don't watch enough TV to know. I do know that there are some political ads on YouTube and things like that. I'm seeing a lot more of the non-presidential advertising on places like X, formerly Twitter. I don't know that there's going to be an election.
Yeah.
If there is an election, I have very little faith that it'll be square.
Yeah.
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 Hey, we have a shout out.
I'm
We have a
just
shout out
waiting.
here. We have a shout out here from you from an Alan Maxwell. He says, "I just want to give you a shout out, Ben, and give a word of encouragement. I'm a longtime subscriber. Would appreciate thoughts on being something to share an audience that requires no saltiness." Says you'll know what he means.
It's so hard for me not to be salty.
I know, man.
I'm a salty guy.
You take a lot of flack. I see your post on Twitter. I'm like, dang, they are relentless for him.
Oh, I don't hold back on Twitter. I say things on Twitter I could never say on YouTube.
I know.
Yeah.
It's entertaining. But
It is.
sadly, you're right though. You're just unfiltered. It is what it is.
Yeah, that is nice. I'm not a big fan of electric cars or putting brain chips in people's heads, and I think going to Mars is a really dumb idea. Other than that, I like Elon.
Yeah.
Other than that, thanks for Twitter, Elon.
Gives him an excuse to fund his worldwide internet. I mean, let's tell him we're going to Mars. We'll build rockets so we can control
So-
the flow of information. I like Elon, but I mean, the man's got his hand in a lot of different things, which I think is a good thing because so far he's fighting for freedom. So that's a plus in my book.
Yeah,
As
I
of right
agree.
now.
And you know what? I'm not going to begrudge a capitalist.
Right.
Heck no.
No way.
The other thing is, not only does SpaceX and specifically Starlink have the ability to amplify the age of information in several good ways, those Starlink satellites are like an early warning system. Like they are so vulnerable to space weather, to solar storms, that how many of them go offline or how many of them get taken out when we get a big solar storm, it's almost like if you charted it over time, you could maybe start to see a curve there. Yeah.
I've asked you this before, and I felt kind of dumb asking it, but the anomaly that we're seeing near Antarctica, people keep bringing this up, and I know that you told me this is normal, but just something seems odd about it.
So, basically, here's the deal. The German center that runs it can't do anything without funding from the German government. They don't get their next round of funding for several months, and they have now come out and said, we know how to fix it, but it's not going to be fixed probably until 2025 or maybe later. So this error in the code is going to keep showing this anomaly in the South Atlantic, and nothing we can do about it.
Okay.
The people who would be fixing it, they're being paid to do other things for other government projects or other projects from that German meteorological center. What that anomaly, I'm pretty sure, is because that's on the part of the satellite that detects water, and what we know for sure is there's no actual giant swell up in the ocean.
Right.
There's no giant waves. There's no tsunamis hitting coastlines. That's an exceptionally busy shipping route, and not a single ship has had any issues or reported seeing anything weird.
Right.
But it's right on the edge of the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly, the weakest part of Earth's magnetic field in this ongoing pole shift. That means many things. One, it's the number one place for satellites to have glitches. Number two, it's where the most solar hydrogen in the solar wind is breaking through into the atmosphere. And what's the first thing it hits? The ozone layer. It's creating extra water vapor right there at the weak spot that is tricking the satellite that's looking for water into thinking that the water levels are higher. And so
I see.
The exact physics you would need to explain it, the exact right place in the world you would need to explain it, and then its recurrence, because government workers are apparently government workers in not just the United States, but in Europe as well. So, they claim they know how to fix it. I don't know if that's true, but they also said it's not fixed yet, and it's not going to be fixed for quite some time.
Yeah. I thought it was...
Which is unfortunate.
It only seemed just a little sus to me because it was so close to Antarctica. I guess that was where my mind was going, but I trust you.
Yeah, of course that's suspicious. But, the suspicious stuff that they're doing in Antarctica is on the other side of Antarctica. And,
Fair enough.
The other thing is, they could be doing some suspicious stuff there, but the only thing that satellite can see is water. It can't see anything else. It can't see radar. It can't see scalar. You could put 1,000 harps on a giant barge and stick them right under there. The satellite would be like, I don't see nothing. Nothing. I don't see anything. So, of course they're doing shady stuff in Antarctica. Yeah, they are. But we just know that it has nothing to do with anything that's actually happening in the ocean. This is something that's happening higher up in the atmosphere. And okay, so number one place for satellite glitches. All right, what does the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly do? It lets in more hydrogen. What is that hydrogen hitting when it breaks into the atmosphere? The ozone layer, oxygen. And so, the other thing is there's no cloud anomalies. There's no storm anomalies or anything like that, which is the kind of thing you would see if they were messing around with energy weapons.
Right.
Like if you're going to mess around with energy weapons and have it keep showing up, at least have the energy weapons do something. They're not doing anything. Right. Nothing's happening. So, yes, they're doing some shady stuff in Antarctica. I think that they finally realized how much of past civilizations is hidden under the snow and ice.
Yeah.
But, both are past civilizations and extraterrestrial civilizations. But in terms of that anomaly in the South Atlantic Ocean, the swell anomaly, that one's actually much easier to explain than exactly what the heck they're doing down there on the other side of Antarctica.
Oh, that was a really good explanation. It pretty much solidified my question because you nailed it. But what you were saying about the shadiness there, and it kind of ties into your polar shift, because there in Antarctica and up there in northern, like Alaska, and close to the other pole, clearly they were at two different spots at a previous time because there's so much stuff buried up there.
Oh yeah.
They weren't always sitting under tons of ice. And it seems like they're discovering more stuff up top and down at the bottom. It's really fascinating stuff they're finding. Different pyramids on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, you guys probably remember my theory is that those areas were at the tropics.
Yep.
Not only does it explain a lot of the geologic and fossil evidence, just think about the mammoths that they found frozen in the polar region. There ain't enough food for them to eat there now. And they were frozen during the glacial cycle. There was nothing there. Nothing there at all to eat. They weren't just traipsing around their whole lives in snow with no food to eat. There was lushness there. It's very obvious. And the only way that could happen during a glacial cycle is if it's down here at the low latitudes. But yeah, I mean, I wish I knew all the stuff they were doing down in Antarctica. I think that most of their northern Canadian exploration has taken place already because they started there. They were doing that in the 40s, 50s, 60s, like crazy. I'd love to know what they're doing down in Antarctica right now. I know people talk about a lot of stuff, but watching the atmosphere, watching the ionosphere, watching the magnetic field, watching weather, watching seismic activity, I don't see evidence of them manipulating the rest of the world. I see evidence of them looking for information and uncovering stuff and then just not telling us what they found. Right. I think it's much more an exploration than an exploitation of something. Because here's the thing. If they really wanted to exploit or use something like that, you don't have to go down to Antarctica to do that. You know how hard it is to get onto Area 51? They don't have to go down to Antarctica to do a bunch of secret stuff. You know how hard it is to find a ship out in the middle of the ocean? They don't have to go down there to do nefarious stuff. But if that's where the stuff that they want to find is, you can't dig in Nevada and find something buried in the ice in Antarctica. You got to actually go down there to get it. So,
No.
This is a really good question. Somebody asked, do you think the firing up of CERN on April 8th, the same day as that eclipse, is contributing in any way to the acceleration of the many demonic agendas and or natural disasters?
Towards the end of the question, my approach to the answer completely changed, because the vast majority of stuff you hear about CERN is complete nonsense.
Right.
But they are absolutely attempting to open those kinds of portals. As crazy as that sounds. And I'm usually the guy debunking the crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what they're trying to do. Now, I guess for those who don't know, who haven't heard the spiel on this before, so CERN can make pretty powerful magnetic fields, but they're the size of a mosquito.
Right.
A good way to think about this is the magnets that hold your kid's A+ test on your refrigerator are 2 to 4 times stronger than Earth's magnetic field at the point of the magnet. That doesn't mean that they're stronger than the totality of Earth's magnetic field, or that you can wave a refrigerator magnet around and mess with the planet's field. Outside the front door of CERN, they crank it up full juice. You can't even detect the magnetism. It's a tiny little thing. But despite the fact that all of the stuff about, CERN is doing this and CERN is doing this to the weather or the magnetic field, no, it's not. But what they are doing is trying to create portals. It's a demonic lab. There's almost no doubt in my mind. Between the rituals at the opening, the Shiva statue outside, and the physics of what they're trying to do, I'm pretty sure they at least believe they can open portals that way.
And where it's located. It was, from my understanding, built on top of Apollyon's old temple there from thousands of years ago. But no, you're right. Who really knows? So back to your pole shift. Is there a point where it just snaps and stops slowly moving?
That's a good question. Nobody alive has lived through it. All we know is that the evidence suggests at one point it'll be going 100 times faster than it is right now.
Because of the food in the mammoth's mouth.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna happen very quickly. But that can also happen over the course of a day or a couple hours. We know that it didn't kill the whole world. And it never has in any of these cycles. So it can't be so violent that literally creatures get thrown off into space and so many volcanoes erupt that the sky is blacked out for decades. It's not that. But, the zenith of this should come quickly. When we get down to the point where something little from the sun takes out our power and we're back in the Stone Age, it'll probably be only weeks to months before we're seeing global auroras nightly because solar plasma is breaking through everywhere. It'll be only weeks to months before the climate is shifting in a major way. During that time, we'll probably see an unfathomable uptick in earthquakes and volcanoes as well. And then there will be that one really, really bad day where what happened to the mammoths all those years ago happens again. And the people who have made it there are put through the final test. And after that, we're going to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, think about how much we miss Netflix, and then, okay, how do we survive?
Yeah.
Yeah. For folks that haven't seen his disaster cycle video, the short one that's like 13 minutes, it's well worth the watch. It really kind of sums up everything in a 13, 15 minute video. I'll link it in the description. It's how
does I'm not really clear. Do we have any idea of how the shield is repaired after this happens? Is it something from the sun? Is it something with the earth?
Yeah. So the scariest part of this potentially is when you realize that all of these ancient stories have geologic evidence matching up to them. And then you realize that parts of these ancient stories talk about the sun doing something terrifying. And then you look in the geologic evidence and you're like, okay, well, these are isotopes that can only be made in a nova level blast on a star. And when you realize the entire solar system is changing, this is not just the Earth. The entire solar system is changing, including the sun. The chemistry of the sun's atmosphere, which they call the corona, is changing. The magnetic fields on the sun are changing. It's going to have what I call a solar micronova. And, you know, modern day run-of-the-mill solar activity induces electric current all the way down into the mantle. When we get that solar micronova blast, it's going to very much be like clear, boom, on the Earth. And it's going to jolt us back like that, recharge the planet electromagnetically. This is why, this is actually also the only way that those stories from India and a little bit from Aboriginals in Australia could be true. That we go from such an incredible disaster to what seems like a golden age in just days or a couple of weeks, because it's literally like the planet gets a juice, gets a jolt, and the magnetic field is all of a sudden just back like that, and we are electrodynamically normal again as a planet. Technically, as a whole solar system, but I don't think there's a whole lot of us that are going to be experiencing this on Uranus or Enceladus, so we'll just talk in terms of the Earth. Yeah, it'll be like the planet renormalizes electrodynamically very quickly.
So one of the guests made a statement about something that it's actually a very interesting question and statement, but I have an answer. They said, how is the beast system going to provide electricity to enforce the mark of the beast when all this happens? And here's the answer. They've been anticipating this for a long time. There's a reason why they've been suppressing 0 point energy, because it is their backup alternative when the whole grid goes down and they bring the world out of the ashes. They're going to have an answer on how to have their system up and how to enforce everything. I really think that's why they've suppressed that for so long, because that is their backup plan. Right now, we're totally dependent on fossil fuels in the grid system that is fragile. They're holding that as their ace card. That's just my 2 cents.
So I think that that's their goal. I don't think they're there yet. If they were there already, I think no. I think that because they're still using medieval tactics to try to herd the sheep as much as they can. I mean, it's literally like the shepherd sees the storm coming and it knows that there's a way to click a button on its staff and just transport everybody back to the shelter. But no, he can't do it yet. It's not quite there yet. So he's trying to get the sheep to come back and, you know, run back to the house, run back to the barn. Now, I could be wrong, but that would be a dangerous gamble they're playing, because they're risking not doing, you know, not being ready.
This is the one thing I'll disagree with you on, just because so many people I know that are deep on the black side of things. Their technology they have is probably 5 decades ahead of what they're letting the world know about.
It is, but there's a big difference between that and the end goal. You know, there were people in the 30s and the 40s who were talking about the kind of technology that would eventually be the nuclear bomb that, you know, made the Concorde jets and the Blackbird fighters and things like that. But obviously that's not as far as you can take it.
Right.
It's a powerful tool, to be sure. And a lot of the stuff that's needed to tap into 0 point energy, I don't know how anything like that survives. You know, it's kind of like, it's a more complex version of somebody saying, okay, well, I'm going to get off the grid and I'm going to put up solar panels everywhere. so I'm not on the grid when it goes down. And it's like, you don't think your solar panels are going to catch on fire? You don't think those are going to be electromagnetically destroyed? Now, of course, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's not like the access to zero-point energy comes from magic rocks that are impervious to,
no, of course,
technological stuff. I mean, the technological stuff that they need to access zero-point energy, what's their plan to shield this stuff? Because you can't shield from the micronova. It's going to induce down to Earth's core. There's nowhere to hide. And there's no way to make these materials after the world has been lost. So
maybe that's why Elon's trying to go to Mars. He was trying to get that technology out of the way so he can bring it back.
I mean, maybe, but Mars is going to be jacked way
no.
Earth is. It doesn't even have a magnetic field.
Yeah, this is a solar system a phenomenon.
Okay.
What if these pyramids that they have been guarding so closely in the North and South Pole that they are convinced generate power just based off Tesla's theory that he proved with the water tower?
Very possible. Very possible.
What if that is their plan? Because they have some uber top secret stuff both in Alaska and on the South Pole.
So here's the thing. It's the kind of thing that would allow them to rule a primitive prehistoric society.
Exactly.
It's the kind of energy that could give them light, that could rapidly grow food, could rapidly accelerate seed germination. It's not the kind of technology that could throw a lightning bolt across the world. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
We tend to think of advanced technology as being bigger, more powerful, faster, on the verge of magic.
Right.
This is actually what the first rulers of the ancient world had. But it's not like they were actual gods. I mean,
right.
What we're talking on here right now over the internet, this is far more technologically advanced. Doesn't mean they didn't have a way to have some power. And yes, that absolutely, I do think is their plan. And, it's not just the pyramids, but obelisks and other things like that as well. And you know how many obelisks there are around the world. And those probably aren't the only kinds of shapes that can make things like this work. It's the kind of thing where you don't need to boil water to spin magnets. You don't need nuclear reactions. You don't need to throw coal or wood in a fire to then heat water, and then it's literally the ambient energy of the universe that can be accessed and used. And I do think that is their plan. I got about a minute or two that I'm going to put my kids to sleep.
No, I get it. Kip had a question. Ask Ben about ley lines and pyramids.
So, unfortunately, the ley lines are not where they once were. Now, some areas of the world are still on ley lines, but here's the thing. These ley lines have to change every time we go through one of these disaster cycles. Unless literally every one of these major things was built after the last catastrophe, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Some of them seem to be really, really, really old, like way older than scientists and teachers want to tell us that it is.
Right.
Like they seem to be way, way older. And if they are that old, some of them aren't on the same ley lines. I do think the ley lines are going to light up in the sky, though. I do think that's going to be the case.
Yeah. It really, guys, to summarize everything Ben said, I think your telltale sign will be to look for auroras in the skies. When you start seeing more and more of them, that should be like your red flag, if I understand Ben correctly. The more of these we see, the more you should be concerned. And when you're seeing these in southern Florida, southern Texas, or if you're in Mexico and are seeing these almost nightly, you should be really concerned.
Or like for places that are used to looking up and seeing the faint green wisps, if they're now powerfully green and now you're seeing a lot of pink and reds and oranges, that's your sign, because you already see aurora all the time.
Right.
So if you're a place where you don't usually see them, when you see them, it's not good. If you can usually see them, when you start seeing more pinks, reds, and oranges than you're used to, it's not a good sign.
Yeah, I had a friend send me a picture from. They live in Alaska, and he sent me a picture, a cell phone photo. It almost looked fake, Ben. It was. It was
that purplish one.
Yeah, there was an aurora that I had never seen.
Purples too.
It was just. It looked fake, and if it hadn't come from a friend of mine, I would have been like, "That's not real." But he's like, he did a cell phone video.
I hear what you're saying. Absolutely.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
And, there are places where you might have to look this up real fast, but there's an auroral phenomenon known as Steve. As dumb as that sounds, they just call it Steve, and it actually stands for something. It's not as dumb as it sounds, but it tends to be purple or blue. Things like that will be showing up more, and there are enough pictures of it that you can memorize what Steve looks like in 20 seconds. So I would say that's what we look for. And guys, I really appreciate you having me on and getting a chance to talk to everybody. God bless both of you and all your listeners, and please God bless all of us, actually.
Thank you so much, man. I look forward to the next time. Later, bud.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
Oh, I love having him on.
Yeah, he's a no BS guy. I like not having to question everything about someone, because I just know he's gonna let me have it straight.
Yeah. Jesus too. Sorry, we didn't get the chance to ask your super chat. Jesus asks, what opinion do you have on solar maximum collapsing the polar cells and its effects, like mammoth with food in their stomachs, frozen, and how the equator will be the best place to be? Do you agree? And then the 2029 pole flip via Osiris versus Apophis. So there's a lot in there. I feel like he answered a bunch of those.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jesus too, he explained that, and you're on the right track. I mean, we are seeing a shift right now, but it's slow. But there will be a time, especially when we are seeing these extremely bright aurora borealises all the time. Like, we're not seeing them enough yet. We were seeing them maybe once every few years. Now we're seeing them almost weekly. But then it will get to a point where you will see them nightly in every spot on the planet. And then in the places that normally see them are starting to see these massively dark purple and green and blue ones. Then there's a coming time period where that polar shift will happen over the course of a day. It won't be jarring like people flying and stuff like that, but it will be very similar to that movie 2012, where it will shift, and by the end of the day, New York will be the North Pole, and it's and
the
equator.
He actually has a graphic illustration of where everything will be. How they're expecting it to flip, and where's good places to be, where's bad places to be.
And not only that, the shorelines are going to change too, and this is the reason why he moved to the mountains in the middle of the country. He's explained this is probably one of the most important factors of surviving this time period is placement in advance. He used to live in Texas and packed up shop, and moved to the Colorado mountains for a very specific reason. He brought his whole family and moved up into the mountains because the shorelines pretty much on every border of every country will come in 100 miles. He's got a map that explains it all. And this, guys, this is one of those things that is, you get worried about, all in all, we have the Lord to protect us, and I'm not concerned about it at all. But it is a fascinating topic, and it's just a part of what's to come.
Yeah, and last time he was on the show, we talked about it potentially being the reason why the sky rolls up like a scroll, because he's described that if you're outside and you're looking at it, it's not like you're going to be thrown down to the ground or against a wall,
Right.
but you'll be looking up at the stars and they will literally start moving out of their place. So
Yes.
if, like for me, if I'm looking at the Big Dipper, suddenly it's going to start rolling up and moving out of its place at a noticeable clip.
It will be a phenomenal
Yeah.
experience. It will be very, very interesting. Like I said, it won't happen so fast that it will scare people to death, but you'll look up and you'll be like, why are the stars moving? And
Right.
then by the end of the day, 6, 7, 8 hours later, everybody will be in a different climate.
I'd love to have him on again soon because we didn't get a chance to talk about, alien races, fallen angels, Nephilim, the disaster cycle that lasts, 12,000 years. Because I know he's got some interesting opinions on those kind of things. Because it's entirely possible, and the scripture actually makes allowance for this in the beginning when it says the earth became without form and void. That's the Hebrew tohu vu bahu. When it says the earth, I think the scripture actually says the earth was without form and void. The Hebrew is tohu vu bahu, which means it became without form and void. That allows for the disaster cycle to where God created the earth, the first heaven and the earth, and it was destroyed. That would be the becoming without form and void. And then the creator is hovering over the creation and putting things back together, and that's where you have Adam and Eve being Adam being formed from the dust of the ground, Eve being formed from his rib. So there is allowance in the scripture, and he's very well read on the scripture, and even on stuff that most people aren't really aware of. Would love to have a more biblical conversation if we can. If he's interested in coming on and talking about some of that stuff, that'd be awesome.
He would love to. It's just no one ever gives him the opportunity to talk about that. But he knows his eschatology really well. And his disaster cycle video that he explains, he actually ties in some eschatology into it. When he made that video, his timeline was different, though. So I'm going to share that video, and the timeline is 10 to 20 years later. And as Watchful and I have been explaining, every time he messages me on Twitter, it's speeding up and speeding up. It's sped up to the point now where it actually matches our timeline.
Yeah, for 2027,
where before
2028.
Where before there was a 2-decade gap between timelines. But it's super interesting. Speaking of which, I have to go deal with my kids too. They're all waiting on me. And man, I had a really good time chatting with everybody.
Yeah. I want to go through here. I put up the questions.
Sure. I mean, I can go back. I can come right back. I don't have to turn it off. Let's deal with it.
Yeah, go ahead and deal with that. This will take like 5 minutes. It's just he answered a bunch of this stuff, so I want to make sure that I address these for folks.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So one question was: Will Florida hurricane ramp up too? Need to think about the old ones. Yeah, he did say that if you're in an area that gets a particular type of weather, expect that type of weather. Oh, did you change my screen? I actually don't have anything to share. Oh, hey everybody. Yeah, he did actually say that. Expect an increase in weather pattern. So if you're in an area with tornadoes, expect more tornadoes. Earthquakes, expect more earthquakes. Heat, expect more heat. Things like that. Okay, so are there measures us common people can take to survive the solar flare EMP effects on our health? Drink more water, stay inside, wear 10 hats. Oh, I should have asked that one. That would have been fun. He kind of answered that one. We talked about being prepared. I think I actually mentioned that. He confirmed it. So being prepared to resolve fights and differences, because it sounds like emotions may be escalated potentially if we're all going to get a little dumber. find get yourself in a position to be more peaceful. Maybe think about drawing or relaxing and not doing something that may be stressful. As far as preparing, drinking more water, I don't know if you mentioned that, but definitely be prepared. I'm thinking of people who are in areas where weather is on the increase. If you're in an area that gets hot, make sure that you've got your stuff set up if your power goes out and your home heats up. If what happens if your air conditioner stops working, and that goes for anything. If there is any kind of solar flare EMP effect, which he didn't make it seem like there would be any kind of a solar flare. Electrical, like 5%, I think is what he said. 5% chance that there could be something serious that affects our electronics. He went so far as to say, don't even. It seemed like he was saying, don't bother to unplug your equipment, because he didn't think that it was going to affect electronics like the Carrington effect. More weather and health. He stated that during these things, cardiac arrest is a very common thing. So anything you can do to prevent cardiac arrest, take aspirin, make sure you have the medicine you need in the event of it, make sure people are around you so you're not alone. Maybe go stay with maybe go stay with relatives and family if that's a possibility, things like that. All right, next question. Is it possible that leftovers from previous civilizations, aka mutants, reptiles, and others, are living underground, and the same might happen to some humans in the coming pole shifts? That's kind of one of the ones I wanted to ask him, and we're going to see if we can't get him to come back on and talk about those things, about previous civilizations and mutants and fallen angels and the reptile people and aliens and all those things. Will Google Earth work over Antarctica? It either does or it doesn't. Google Earth is actually a discontinued product. They got it to the point to where it is, and then they just left the product as it's a app that you can actually download on your computer. I don't think they do any updates. I believe you can go look at Antarctica. I used it in some of my videos on I've used it in some of my videos. I think I've used it in, I don't know, I'm trying to think if I looked at Antarctica. I don't think I've looked at Antarctica specifically, but they modify those things anyway. They redact sensitive information. Are there any theories on the speed of the pole shift? I have a mountain 2 miles east. He did cover that. I don't remember exactly what it was. What was it? 100? I can't remember. Just from previous conversations and from what he explained tonight, most specifically from the last time that was he on our show? I don't know if it was when he was on his show or if it was just something that he answered in his show. It might be. I think it's the video where he actually does where the Earth is going to rotate to. I think he mentioned that it'll happen in a day. It'll happen suddenly, but it's not going to be so fast that you'll really notice it unless you're paying attention. So it will happen over the course of, I think tonight he said over a couple hours to a day that it'll take to shift into to settle into its new location. So what is all involved with that? He goes into that in his videos as far as water moving, shorelines moving, weather changes. Is going to be a crazy ride. How long before we see the Antichrists? Didn't get a chance to ask him that. I'm looking at Pentecosts. I'm currently working on my timelines. Pentecosts, and this is based on Christian, who's coming on our show soon. I think actually the 14th, maybe. I could be wrong about that. He was recently on Janie Duvall. He's looking at Pentecost as when the two witnesses receive their anointing. He's of the opinion that it's two people that were raised up for our generation. I believe, I could be wrong about that. I believe that's what he was saying on Janie Duvall. Because he did kind of get into some other things about Moses and Elijah and Enoch, and he gave his reasonings why he thinks it's potentially two two people who were raised up in this generation who will receive an anointing and potentially receive that power and authority. I think he even kind of talked about groups too. I need to go back and watch that video in preparation. But anyway, so here's the thing. What we know from Revelation 12, basically Revelation 11 through 13, because when the two witnesses receive their power and authority, they prophesy for 1,260 days, so 3.5 years. So we learned that from Revelation 11. Revelation 12, you have the beast that's preparing to devour the man-child, whatever that is. When the man-child is born, it's caught up to the throne, so it doesn't have the opportunity to devour the man-child, but then it pursues the woman for 42 months. And then in Revelation 13, you have the first beast and the second beast. The first beast is given the authority to persecute the saints for 42 months. So there's a lot there. So I would say probably the expectation is when we see the two witnesses, we'll probably also know who the Antichrist is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
it's an exciting time to be alive.
That's for sure.
It really, really is. Is in some areas, folks are fearful of it. There's really your feet are firmly planted with Christ. There's nothing to be afraid of.
That's right.
Have to really put your trust and faith and put it in Him. He's going to take care of His children. He will give you foresight to understand what to do. You just really need to work on that personal relationship with Him, because He will communicate with you. I thought for the longest time people were crazy when they said that they spoke with the Father and whatnot, and it's not nonsense. The more I work on my personal relationship with Him, and this is something that takes time, because this has been a 4.5 year journey for me, and only lately have I been hearing His small voice, and it's been in incremental stages, and then it's like a light switch when it happens. It's something that you can't unhear. So it's available for everybody that has their feet firmly planted with Him. It's available for everybody. And from my understanding, all the manifestations are available to everybody. You just have to take the time and put in the work, and your faith will manifest. It just takes time. And this is something that I did not understand a year ago. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But it's fascinating stuff, and it's absolutely incredible. Though I will say, though, if there's a shred of doubt, it will prevent all of this. There's a lot of it have to do with your faith and your belief, and really at your core, connecting with Him. And that happens as you work on that personal relationship. Folks that only connect with Him once a week, 2 hours on a Sunday, this is something that they will struggle with. And this isn't a dig. It's you want to have that personal relationship where, you talk to Him when you wake up and every few hours. If I told you how my day goes, you would think I'm a Fruit Loop, but I'm constantly talking to Him.
Talk to Him. You should have a vocal relationship with your Father in heaven. Praying. It's not just a one-time at church thing. It's a continual thing. Have that constant relationship with Him, and you will hear that still small voice more often. Talk about your concerns. Talk about what you're worried about. Talk about what you're happy about, and you'll start hearing responses and getting responses. Definitely encourage every one of you. When we're done with the show tonight, even right now, if you've got something on your heart, let God know what is on your heart. Make your requests known, because when you ask anything in the name of Yeshua, He's faithful to give you those things. So you should be having those conversations and making those prayers and those supplications. Absolutely.
Yeah, I probably talk to him more than I talk to anybody. If I had to put it on a scale and compare, it's and it's something that you'll enjoy once you get in the habit. So if this is something that's new for you and it overwhelms you, or the process seems complicated, try to block out the noise from the religious fanatics. It's much more simple than what
Yeah.
it appears. He just wants a personal relationship with each and every one of you. It's salvation. It literally is a free gift for everybody, regardless of your past and your transgressions. He just
Yeah.
wants a personal relationship with you. That's it. And
Yep.
when you work on that, things will start to change. The Holy Spirit has an incredible way of changing someone internally. Things that you used to worry about and struggle with, things that you felt like you would never be able to get past and move on with, will eventually dissipate. Things that
Yeah.
you feel like you struggle with as far as sinful nature, it will dissipate. I've witnessed
Right.
it myself.
Yeah, that's
There
right.
was I would, before I would worry about this stuff. I would worry, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And that is literally the enemy putting doubt in your mind, because your worries rarely ever manifest into reality. That is the enemy playing with your mind. If you, that's why the Father tells you not to stress and worry and be fearful, because he's got you. And understanding that into your core, where you work on that personal relationship and allow him to bear the burden of the things that concern you, he will provide you with relief. He will provide you with answers. And the more that you involve him with everything that you are struggling to get past, the more he will provide you with answers and options and avenues to pursue and conquer those problems. And this is
Yeah.
coming from someone that has struggled with just about everything over the years.
Yeah, you have to be really careful with what you pray for, because sometimes you don't realize what you're asking. If you're asking to learn patience, you're probably going to be put in harder situations. If you're praying for strength, you're probably going to be made weak so that you can work up and recognize the strength. I just heard Gabriel Iglesias made a really great comment. He said, being made miserable helps you recognize peace. Man, what a powerful statement. It's just like, we don't recognize, good and justice and peace and, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, meekness, all those things, with nothing to contrast them to. So these trials and tribulations that we're going through, they're hard. They definitely are. There's nothing that eliminates excuses like trials and tribulation, but they highlight the peace, and they, um, usually they're for the better. I mean, nothing eliminates excuses like tribulation. It's God's way of correcting your path. And when you can learn to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding, then you can learn to trust him to guide your path. And if you're going through something hard, this could be something that's correcting your path. So I have one more question here that didn't get answered. I'm going to read it. I don't have an answer for it right now. We'll probably have Ben back on. But so this was, faith and peace mean law in its natural language. A tribulation is a public trial of judgment. Do you think God will judge this world's Sanhedrin before the house of Israel? I don't know in the order in regards to judgments to this. I know that Yeshua will separate the sheep from the goats, and there will be judgments in the future as far as the Sanhedrin before the house of Israel. I do know that there's the wheats and the tares. The tares will be gathered up first. I don't know if I don't believe that's the judgment in any way. But yeah, that's a good one to actually talk about when Ben comes back to get into a little bit more biblical things. So that was the end of the Q&A. I'm going to end this now. There we go.
All right.
All right.
So, anybody have any other questions they want to fire off? You know, I'm welcome to chat about anything. It's you know, last night we had a pretty interesting show. It's, you know, sometimes we get in uncomfortable positions, and it really truly shows the fruit of someone's character on how they handle themselves in a stressful situation. And I'm, you know, frankly, I'm proud of how Watchful handled himself last night.
Thank you.
With how things went. Yeah, there's gonna be times in life where things do get uncomfortable. That's just the nature of the society that we live in. And you can learn by watching these experiences. We, you know, our show, we don't always want it to be full agreement. We enjoy being pushed into uncomfortable positions to, you know, talk about stuff that is difficult. It's difficult to learn about difficult situations when everything is easy going. So, you know, I caught some slack and feedback from folks saying, hey, you know, last night wasn't good, this and that. Look, it's all a growing experience, and you can learn from every situation. You can learn what to do and what not to do. So take that for what it's worth, guys.
I want to share something with you guys that may make you cry. I know it makes me cry half the time when I talk about this. But so let me set the foundation. When you're thinking about who you are in Christ. Now, don't jump to any assumptions while I'm telling this. I'll preface that I'm not attacking anyone, and I'm not referring to last night in any way, shape, or form. But I want to share this with you because it had a dramatic effect on my life, and I think it'll bless you guys and have a dramatic effect on yours too. So when you think about your life and think about who you are, and you think about the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles that Jesus chose in order to organize and lead his ministry. He didn't choose 12 Pharisees, people who knew the scripture. He didn't choose 12 tax collectors. He chose a variety of people. He chose a tax collector. He chose a fisherman, farmer, a zealot, a variety of people, suffice it to say. But these people weren't the shining examples of living rightly in society. You know, you think of Matthew, he was a tax collector. He was taking money from people in order to pay the Roman government. You know, The Chosen, I think, does a really good job of illustrating the differences of the disciples. But one of them, which I think goes most misunderstood and underrated, is Judas. You have to remember that, or keep this in mind. Let's put it this way. Keep this in mind. Jesus knew that he likely knew that he was a thief. And he still called him to be one of the 12 disciples. He likely knew that he would steal if given the opportunity, and he put him in charge of the money. And he likely knew that he was going to betray him. And he still sat with him at the Last Supper and even dipped in the same bowl he was eating out of. He gave him every opportunity, knowing that he was going to screw up in order to repent, because he loved Judas. Now, you might be wondering, so what does this mean for us? This means that to truly love your neighbor, you can't push people like Judas away, because it's our responsibility to give them every opportunity, because that's what our Lord did. He showed us that example. You guys know that he could have called 12 legions of angels. He didn't even have to allow himself to be killed, but he did. He allowed himself to be killed to pay for people like Judas, to pay for their sins. Now, I think it's a sign of maturity when you can be around people and know that they're probably going to hurt you, and you allow that anyway because you want to reach them, even eating with them at your dinner table. And when you really start to realize that you're okay with somebody like Judas being in your group, and then you look in the mirror and you realize you might be that Judas, that's when it really hits home that your Lord and Savior died because he believed in you. So that's what I think of when I think of him. He was part of the 12. He was part of the organization. He literally was out there 2 by 2 with his brothers healing. And he allowed Satan into his heart, and he made a mistake. We all make mistakes. He didn't have to die. He could have called 12 legions of angels, but he still allowed himself so that he could be the payment for every single one of us who he's called.
Pretty proud for stuff.
Yeah.
It's truth burns.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, guys, we really enjoyed our time with you this evening. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to spend time with everybody. I have a wedding this weekend. I think I can still make every show. Just for some reason, if it's just Kip and Watchful, just know that my wedding went longer than I anticipated. But I think I'm good for every night. I'll know more tomorrow, but yeah, I think I'll be on tomorrow night as long as we end the event with enough time for me to drive home. So, but guys, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. It always means the world to us, and thank you for being patient when things sometimes get tense, but it's all a learning experience. You know, it's not always going to be smooth and sunny skies. That's just life. But it's how you navigate the storm that really dictates the reality of the outcome. So, guys, everyone have a wonderful night. Watchful, you got anything else?
Nope, that's everything. Love you guys.
All right, love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Shalom, shalom.